After a long time, Shen Qingqiu turned to look at Shang Qinghua. "What is this?" Shang Qinghua squeezed out 3 words. "I don't know." He really didn't. The creature was vaguely human-like. It had a full head of long hair, but it seemed to be entirely composed of cartilage. Its skin was rough, hard, and covered in patches of scales here and there, like a python half scraped of its scales. Though Shen Qingqiu had originally thought that it was a female ghost, upon taking a closer look at its face, though it was bloated, he could faintly discern that it was that of a man. Shang Qinghua gave Shen Qingqiu a questioning look. "Did I?" he started. Meaning, "Did I write about this kind of thing?" Shen Qingqiu frowned. "I don't think so." If the original novel had given this thing more than 10 words of description, there was no way he wouldn't have remembered. The two looked hopefully at Gong Yixiao. He didn't recognize it either, and he felt a bit awkward. If the 2 masters cannot recognize this creature, it is even more unfamiliar to this junior. "Let me say something," Shang Qinghua said suddenly. "What if this isn't this creature's natural form?" That made sense. It was so grotesque that it certainly didn't seem like a normal creature, but rather a deformed specimen or a crossbreed. Punishment from the heavens, a curse, or a cultivator who failed to cultivate a forbidden technique, Shen Qingqiu muttered. "All 3 of those events could indeed result in this kind of monster," said Gong Yixiao. The snake man on the ground seemed to be irritated by the word, quote, monster, and its tail-like back half furiously slapped the ground. Shang Qinghua hurriedly dodged away. "Young hero Gongyi, young master Gongyi, don't say such irresponsible things. It seemed like it can understand us. Use a different word, a different word." The creature's gaze remained fixed on Shen Qingqiu's sleeve. At that moment, Shen Qingqiu noticed that although this creature looked sinister and terrifying enough to make one retch, the eyes gazing through its curtain of tangled hair were incomparably clear, just like the water of the Ju Lake. He had a sudden realization. "No wonder it attacked us. Look!" He pointed. "Its eyes, they probably look like that because it drinks the unsullied morning dew every day. Now, look at its scales. There's lichen growing between the cracks, green with a bit of red, the exact same kind that grows on the stone walls. It's been visiting this cave for a long time. Perhaps it's been living off of the spiritual dew within the Ju Lake," Shen Qingqiu said. And if the sun-moon dew mushroom was picked, the main force driving the circulation of the spiritual energy in this lake would be destroyed. The spiritual energy in the Ju Lake would gradually be depleted, and eventually it would become a pool of mere wastewater, and it might even dry up completely. That was why this creature had been following them, waiting for a chance to attack. "But Senior Shen, if that monster has been living off of the dew water, wouldn't it be better to eat them directly?" Gong Yixiao asked. "Why did it never pick the mushrooms for itself?" "When we were in Bailu Forest, it kept obstructing us," said Shen Qingqiu. "At first, it only retreated after it was burned by the sunlight reflecting off of my sword blade. Perhaps it couldn't stand light, especially light from the sun and moon. So it can only move within the shades of the forest, inside caves, and beneath the water." He pointed at the shaft of light beaming down from the cave's domed ceiling. Then he continued, "The sun-moon dew mushrooms are steeped in sunlight and moonlight all day and all night. Of course it couldn't approach them." As confirmation, he withdrew a tender mushroom and swung it back and forth. As expected, the snake man's eyes lit up, and it urgently craned its neck toward it, bearing a mouthful of dense white teeth. Gong Yixiao prodded it with the hilt of his sword and flipped it over again. The snake man strained, struggling and wriggling on the ground, but it couldn't turn back over. Gong Yixiao turned his sword point down, seemingly preparing to stab it through. "Wait," Shen Qinqiu said hurriedly. As expected, Gong Yixiao stopped. "Senior," he asked in confusion. "You said before that the common people within a several-kilometer radius of Bailu Forest had never suffered demonic attacks," Shen Qinqiu asked tactfully. "Yes." "Then that means this creature has never done anything malicious. There's no need to exterminate it. Moreover, all it's ever done has been to drink the dew water in this cave. We were the ones who intruded and disturbed it." Since his senior had spoken, of course Gong Yixiao had to obey. Shen Qinqiu spoke true. If this monster really had killed or harmed humans, Huanhua Palace would have discovered and eradicated it a long time ago. It was precisely because it had never done any harm that it had not yet been killed. Therefore, Gong Yixiao sheathed his sword, and he observed Shen Qinqiu looking at the creature on the ground with a benevolent gaze. Gong Yixiao believed that Shen Qinqiu was cut from the same cloth as the masters from Zhaohua Monastery, who believed in mercy and charity. He could never have guessed that Shen Qinqiu's interest in such strange creatures was equivalent to the average Zhongdian reader's interest in the hundreds and thousands of flower-like maidens, each more beautiful than the last. Even after they had left the depths of the cave, no one noticed that the snake man strenuously struggling on the ground had stopped wiggling and was instead ever so slightly shivering. Pressed under its deformed body was a tiny thin sun-moon dew mushroom sprout. In that pair of incongruously bright eyes, a raging fire began to burn. After exiting Bailu Forest, Gong Yixiao invited the two peak lords to visit Huanhua Palace. He could also notify the old palace master. Shen Qinqiu declined. "After all, we've already enjoyed your assistance. It would be impolite to trouble you further," he said. "You're joking to go to Huanhua Palace for what? A mushroom viewing party? What if your higher-ups take things too seriously and insist on discussing property rights?" Realizing that Gong Yixiao still wanted to detain them, Shang Qinghua took the lead. Young hero Gong Yi, let's dispense with courtesy today. We can visit properly next time. If you come to Changjiu Mountain in the future, you can visit Qingjing Peak. Your senior Shen will definitely look after you well." Shen Qinqiu gave him a look. Shang Qinghua immediately shut up. Shen Qinqiu finally recovered his expression and smiled. "As Shang brother says, Qingjing Peak awaits your arrival." Gong Yixiao knew that, just like its name, the people of Qingjing Peak were fond of peace and quiet and didn't like to be disturbed by guests. He wasn't sure if these were just words of courtesy, but he smiled either way. "I will remember Senior Shen's words," he said. "I may indeed have the chance to disturb you in the future. So, when the time comes, to whom should I send the message announcing my arrival?" Without a second thought, Shen Qinqiu said, "Give it to my disciple, Luo Bing." After he spoke, everyone fell silent. The atmosphere turned a bit odd. Though he was struck for a moment, Shen Qinqiu slowly flapped his fan twice and stiffly continued. "His martial brother, Ming Fan." Gong Yixiao's heart filled with conflicted feelings. Rumor had it that after the Peak Lord Qingjing Peak lost his beloved disciple at the Immortal Alliance Conference, he had for a time fallen into an inconsolable heartbreak, being out of his mind with grief. The man before him right now didn't seem like one who had accepted that Luo Binghe was really gone. Perhaps Shen Qinqiu hadn't come here primarily to pick the mushroom, but rather to take his mind off things so he could briefly forget Luo Binghe's existence. Otherwise, why would two peak lords pursue this task in person? Senior Shen must have come to supervise Senior Shen and make sure he didn't do anything rash. Then, after Shen Qingqiu had forced himself to smile this whole trip, Gong Yixiao had managed to poke his sore spot and stir up melancholic thoughts. As expected, what a deep master and disciple bond. Until they parted ways, Gong Yixiao kept looking back at Shen Qingqiu every 10 steps, his gaze a tangled mix of awkwardness, sympathy, sorrow, and admiration. Shen Qingqiu was a bit creeped out by this gaze. It had only been a slip of the tongue. What stories was Gong Yixiao making up in that head of his? Oh, it's true, Shang Qinghua sighed when they were alone again. It's actually true. Shen Qingqiu gave him a kick that was neither heavy nor light. What's true? I've been watching you for a while and have something to say. Besides, keeping it in is uncomfortable, said Shang Qinghua. Cucumber bro, did you really see Luo Binghe as the apple of your eye? Did you adore him as your darling baby and disciple? He went on, analyzing the evidence piece by piece. I heard your Qingjing Peak's disciple say that ever since returning from the Immortal Alliance conference, Shen Marshal Brother has been out of his mind with grief, his thoughts wandering all over the place. Time to time, you called Luo Binghe's name, and you stand in front of that sword mound and sigh in sorrow. I didn't believe it, but just now I finally witnessed it with my own eyes. Cucumber bro, I really never thought that you were this sort of person. Fuck. Out of your mind again? Is this phrase going to be the eternal stain on my lifetime of hard work? My disciples all supposedly walk the path of scholarly detachment. When do they turn into such gossips? Spreading this sort of nonsense everywhere. What are you doing with your master's image? Shen Qingqiu continued to dig his own grave. Cucumber bro, can I ask, how did you see Luo Binghe? I remember you were one of his fans, right? You roasted a huge number of the characters I wrote. But even so, you never roasted him. To you, is he a character or is he a... A chill ran down Shen Qingqiu's back. This bizarre interrogation from Great Master Airplane shooting towards the sky was identical in tone to high school girls gossiping in the dorms after lights out. Tell me, do you have a crush on so-and-so? No? What are you talking about? Dodging the question. Don't be shy. I hope you go to bed. Lightning, lightning from the 9 heavens. Shang Qinghua was in fact innocent. He was honestly asking and was interested in discussing the matter. It was Shen Qingqiu who was overthinking the skeletons in his closet. Why aren't we moving? Shen Qingqiu snapped, interrupting him. Shang Qinghua stared. What? Shen Qingqiu stared back, then shoved the reins in his hand. Gong Yixiao left, so we need a driver. Why haven't you driven even once? Shang Qinghua asked suspiciously. So you want to push a heavily poisoned patient over the edge? Heavily poisoned my ass, thought Shang Qinghua. Who was happily fighting monsters and blowing up spiritual legs just now? Have some dignity. Shen Qingqiu relaxed within the carriage and shook out his sleeves. There were still 5 years before Luo Binghe would leave the endless abyss and return to the human realm. If nothing went wrong, the mushrooms they had just harvested would definitely be enough to save Shen Qingqiu's life. However, he had forgotten the fundamental stupidity of proud immortal demon Wei. If nothing went wrong at such a crucial junction in a novel storyline, that meant it wasn't exciting enough. Shen Qingqiu made one fatal error in the calculation of these events. And it was that Luo Binghe would come back much more quickly than expected.